Welcome to our panel event, Rain or Shine Storytime. My name's Lucy Bannerman and I'm the children's book critic at The Times. And it's a pleasure to see so many of you here today, taking time at your busy lunchtimes to join us. So I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our fabulous panellists who bring a wealth of knowledge as well as a great deal of fun to the task of promoting reading among children. We have with us today Jonathan Douglas, CEO of the National Literacy Trust, Mikey Please, the Oscar-nominated animation director turned award-winning children's author and illustrator, whose fantastic picture book, The Cafe at the Edge of the Woods, has won the Waterstones Children's Book of the Year. Alison Davis, Consumer Insights Director at HarperCollins and all-round research guru, and Alexander Armstrong, actor, presenter, bass baritone singer, I'm told.
Thank you, yes.
who last year added children's author to his list of titles with the publication of Evenfall, The Golden Linnet. Now, the purpose of today is to discuss how we get kids reading more during the summer holidays. How can we use the summer holidays as an opportunity just to encourage an interest in reading? And as we all know, there's no shortage of studies telling us that children's reading for pleasure is facing an alarming decline. HarperCollins research has indicated that record numbers of children think of reading as a chore, and there's a sharp decline in the number of children being read to from an early age. The latest research from the National Literacy Trust also reveals that the percentage of children and young people who say that they enjoy reading is the lowest in 20 years, which is a bit depressing, with the steepest decline in boys and primary school children in general. But rather than focusing too much on the doom and gloom, we want to talk about the positive strategies, the things that actually work, the practical tips when trying to get a child to read. So this will be a very informal discussion, and we'll wrap up with a giveaway of lots of beautiful books at the end, so hang around for that. Now, I don't know about everyone else in this room, but I know from experience that the surefire way of putting my kids off doing something is by telling them to do it because it's good for them. So like, brush your teeth, it's good for you, eat your veg, it's good for you, read a book, it's good for you, just gets us nowhere. And if anything, that's an invitation for them to do the exact opposite. So for example, just recently, I tried to share the BFG with my 5-year-old twins, and they knew how much this book meant to me. They could smell my desperation. And I'd raved about it. I'd told them that this was the breakthrough book that made me a reader. And so what happened? I overheard them. I caught them both red-handed, trying to stuff it down the back of the bed. And I overheard one say to the other, "Let's hide this so Mummy can't find it." And I'd like to think that's not because they're heathens, but just they knew that I loved it too much, and so it was just an invitation for them to rebel. So, with that in mind, Alexander, shall we start with you first?
Oh, yes.
Have you had similar experiences of trying to pass on an enthusiasm for a particular book and it backfiring?
In my case, it's always with films. Our children can spot the minute something that's wholesome. If they think I think it's going to be good for them, as you say, it is a kiss of death. We've been very, very lucky with books, though, actually. And I think our trick with that was bedtime reading. So bedtime reading, you don't even have to pass any judgment at all. You can just say, I think you might enjoy this. And it's just been something we've done as a matter of course. I've been so lucky that it's been a sort of a daily event for us. Bath time, bedtime. It's the carrot, gets them upstairs. And the trick, I think, with selecting good bedtime reads is always to make sure that you have cliffhangers, and there are few better than Roald Dahl, actually, because there's a perfect mix of really hooky adventure and humour. And if you can get the perfect balance of those sort of sweet and sour things, you leave children at the end, when you say, that's the end of the chapter, they want more. And it's as simple as that. And if you can make story time something that they carry a sort of warmth and glow for, you're most of the way there.
And what if you're halfway through a book and they're just not loving it and they're like, no, can we try another one? Do you push on to the bitter end, or do you just accept defeat and then switch to a different one?
Well, I think I think most books, were published because there was merit in them, you know. And I think you kind of...
It's a relief to this
Yeah,
audience.
I mean, it's good. But I think there's always that great relief at any point. I remember in my life, that sort of great surprise when you think something that was foisted on you for the same reason. You think, oh, God, and then you pick it up and think, oh, I see, it's good. That's why people liked it. That's why it's famous. And it's a lovely thing to discover. And I think I sort of think you have to push on, really, and you'll find it. You'll find it in there. And I think, I don't know, sometimes reading, the way you read can sometimes liven things up. Cracking example of this. Moby Dick was a book that I just fought with nearly all my life until somebody recommended William Hootkins reading Moby Dick. And I've been listening to that on Audible. Bloody hell, it's changed the whole thing. Right? It's hilarious. Turns out Moby Dick is fabulous ribald comedy. And only because the tone of his reading, it's like a very long episode of Frasier. It's just superb. It's beautifully written, and he takes the piss out of all the very sort of high register stuff. There's always a little bubble of humour under there. He's always undermining the voice of Ishmael. So yeah, there you are. Sometimes perhaps it might be look at your own reading, your reading skills. Try and find the warmth. Let a bit of humour bubble through.
Alison, you've been researching children's reading habits for many years. Yes. What are the reasons that children are sort of not choosing to read, and more importantly, what can we do to reverse that?
Well, I think the biggest problem really is that most children think of reading as a task. They just kind of associate it with schoolwork, with homework, with something that they have to do, and it doesn't really hold a lot of fun for them. I think, that's kind of one of the biggest problems really, and I think that a kind of easy way to think about it as a parent then is to think, well, that's our job, is to put the fun back into reading. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to read aloud, as Alexander's just said. But there are lots of different ways to make it fun, but I think you have to make a conscious kind of choice or decision as a parent that that's your role. So reading aloud, as I said, is really good. It makes it fun, but also the other thing about daily reading aloud is that it creates that routine and that time for it. Because we all want our children to get a reading habit, but how else do you get a habit unless you do something often? So that's why kind of regular daily story time is so powerful, I think. But yeah, making it fun is what we need to do, because they're not getting a lot of fun at school.
Yeah, and that's the thing, we were talking about that earlier, weren't we, that you need to make a conscious decision. You need to ring fence that time. Yeah. And it can be really hard when there's so many other things sort of competing for our time and attention.
It really, really can, yes. But I think we did sort of say with this, well, the school holidays are coming up, and that gives us a fantastic 6-week kind of hiatus and a window where we can just try something different. So I've worked with loads and loads of families over the years where I've encouraged them to make what I call a reading promise to their children. So you can say to your child, well, I promise, or Dad and I, or Mum and I promise that between us we'll read to you every day over 6 weeks. And it does seem like an insurmountable problem sometimes, trying to find the time. But if in our heads as parents, if we just ring fence it as a trial, and it's only 6 weeks, so I'm not committing to this forever sort of thing, it can have an absolutely transformational impact on children's reading, because they love the attention and the closeness, and and also flipping that, because oftentimes it's children who have to promise parents things, but if you have made a promise to your child, they love that, and they can sort of say, oh, it's happening today, are you going to read to me tonight, Mum, Dad? Don't forget you're reading to me later, and they very quickly come to kind of expect it and to look forward to it, and it really works. So that's what I would encourage parents to do, is just think, okay, 6-week trial, let's try and really bring books and reading to life. And if anybody wants to try that, we would absolutely love to hear from you afterwards, actually, when they've gone back to school, see how you found it.
And it doesn't just have to be bedtime stories. You can start or do like 5-10 minutes of story time at breakfast or any other point during the day. Does that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can that help?
Absolutely. It's about weaving books and stories and reading into your daily family life, really. So, or even just talking about characters and stories and referring to them and sort of saying, wasn't that funny? Let's read it again later. So just making it a living, breathing part of your family culture, I think.
Jonathan, what have you found with all the research that you've done and the sort of community work that you've done? What works best?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is it is, the headlines are all so gloomy, aren't they? But it's not inevitable. Lisa and I spent Friday afternoon in the Old Vic with 1,000 kids screaming. It was like a pop concert.
Crazy, but they were
for poetry. And it was absolute, that enthusiasm and that love of story, it's within all of us. And somehow it's releasing that, isn't it? And the doom-laden headlines that we are largely responsible for, you flip them and the solutions are there. So, the problems are around, first of all, time, which is kind of what Alison's saying. So actually, how do you, and what better, you've got 6 weeks, which can feel like too long or too short, depending on which end of the day you are. And that is a time when actually you can create and create a new moment. And that can be through reading dens, which you might create under the dining room table, or the booknick, going for the picnic lunch where you actually take books. And actually, all of a sudden, it's not turn your mobile phone off and don't look at a television. It's actually, there's another space, which is another time. And as soon as you other the technology, you're on the losing foot, aren't you? So it's that creative, So the time thing is very important. The access thing is wildly important. We know that actually the truth is that a lot of kids are not reading because they haven't got books at home. Child poverty, the increases in the cost of living, all those kind of things means that a lot of parents are just not able to buy. And they're not finding the books in the communities in the way in which they should as well. So making sure your kids got access to books. But then the third thing, and this is a bit technical, but it's really important, is agency. All of us read because we want to. The point about reading for pleasure is that we're doing it because we want. The motivation comes from ourselves. And we have to be in charge of that moment. Alexander just perfectly describe the kind of psychological framework for reading for pleasure. If Moby Dick is foisted on you, you will never read it for pleasure. You will only read it for pleasure when you want to do it. So that sense of being in charge for those moments is really important. A young person who reads for pleasure is reading pleasure because they choose to. So actually giving them the opportunity to make those choices, encourage them, animate them, enthuse them, but actually ultimately they've got to be in charge. That means they need choice. They need choice about what they're going to read. And that is why the ultimate tip, and I say this because I was a librarian for 10 years, is take them to a library. Because that's the place where they can be and make choices and make mistakes without incurring a financial penalty. And that's the place that they get halfway through and they throw it aside. You don't think, oh my goodness, that was $9.99. The freedom of a library is so incredibly important. Something called the Summer Reading Challenge happens in every library in the country and is the best and most wonderful way of motivating through pathways and through encouragement. And through, but that sense of agency. So time and space, agency, and also access are the three things that are so vitally important.
Just to add to that, we've branded libraries free bookshops in our house, and it's transformed like the way the kids get excited and say, "Hey, do you guys want to go see the free bookshop?" And they'll be like, "The free book, yeah," because then it's like they've made a purchase. It's like they've got this like little financial loophole.
But that's the truth.
And they loved it.
I speak as a librarian. The most successful projects I ever did was when we combined public libraries with Claire's accessories, because the retail environment was slightly more sexy than a library. But that's it. Yeah.
Because a library can sort of conjure images of like dust and, or like gloomy windows.
Yes,
but actually,
you don't have to push it. Yes.
No. From my, I don't think that way. But yeah, the free bookshop. Try it out.
Free bookshop, I think that's a solution right there, isn't it?
I love it.
Now, Mikey, tell us, when you're creating a picture book or you're creating a story for children of any age, how mindful are you that you've got this added competition? You're competing against a million digital distractions. Are you thinking, they've got to watch this book instead of going on YouTube?
The thing I try to bear in mind is that the way into the hands of the children who I'd like to tell these stories to is through the parents, and so to make sure there's something for them too, and so to try to get a balance of things that are going to kind of cross-pollinate across all levels. And I know this as a parent, we'd have a very regular story time every night, and there are some books you run up the stairs to go to and you're like, yes, we're going to get into this one again, And then there are some other ones that you're like, okay, yeah, we're going to do, you know, this one for the 100th time, and it's not what I'm particularly forward to. So I try to be very conscious of make sure there's something, and this is in my animation work as well, of like, it can be lots of different things. It could just be in very sort of opulent artwork if the content is aimed very low, or have something that's going to, like an underhand joke that you know is like aimed at someone. There's a joke about miso paste in this one, which is definitely not for 6-year-olds. But there's also some flatulence related stuff, which is, you know, so I just do try to sort of make sure that, yeah, I'm being respectful of everyone who's going to be involved in this reading activity, because it's so important that parents come to it with a desire to want to be there, because if you've got a reluctant gatekeeper, then the children the kids have no chance whatsoever.
And Alexander, is the issue perhaps that there's no boredom anymore? There's no opportunity
This
to
is
be
a real.
bored.
I talk about this quite a lot. I think boredom is a really vital part of childhood, actually, because it's where your imagination is fired, and particularly in cars. You know, our regular summer holiday, because I grew up in Northumberland, and we would go across over the Irish Sea. We'd go to Northern Ireland, and we'd have a fortnight in Northern Ireland. So our summer holiday involved a very, very long car journey to a ferry, and a very, very long car journey on the other side. And it was always the time of year when my dad would make up a story. And so we would always have one of Dad's stories for the journey, and it was just brilliant. Or we'd sing Green Grow the Rushes O, which weirdly enough features in my book, but there we are. But it was a very important time, that, because apart from anything else, you're projecting all sorts of things as you stare out of the window, and it's a terrific time to reflect. It's also a terrific time because it makes that sort of fallow period makes the fertile period of people reading to you all the more potent, and it's lovely for that reason. You really do. You're quite hungry for I don't know. For me, story time. I was so lucky when I was little that we had teachers at school. We would always have story time at the end of, in the first few years of school. We'd all sit cross-legged on the floor, and there'd just be great stories read. And so for that reason, the word story for me automatically sort of gets something glowing in my mind. I treasure it. I think, this is going to be great because we're going to do something. And a little something chemical happens when you're all in the same world and you're all sharing the same virtues or the same wickedness. You're all there and you're all sort of melded together. And this is particularly important in the family context, that there's a lovely sense of you all being part of this event. And the story kind of exists between you. It's a really magical and important thing for it, and it's not something that's only available to certain people. It's available to everybody. It's a sort of pre-verbal instinct we all have, and it's sort of devastatingly sad to think that it's been sort of crowded out by the crap that's on YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean, the mindless crap that our lot watch, that has no structure, and there's there are no unities to satisfy. It's all just bollocks. It's just,
I think,
Anyway, so yes, boredom, very important.
So to add to that, so because of this lack of boredom, then reading doesn't have a sort of natural place to kind of bubble up and grow. So that's why, as parents, we need to make that time and create that time, because it's not really going to happen naturally, like perhaps it did for us when we were kids. Again, it just comes back to that being conscious and mindful as a parent, that you have to carve out this time, because all these distractions are just at their fingertips, aren't they? So, it's about making time for it every day so that it has a chance to take root, really, and to establish a habit.
Just a point to go back to Alexander. When you're writing your children's books, given that there's all these new distractions, given that the audience has completely changed, do you feel pressure to write shorter books? Do storytellers now have an obligation to adapt, or do you think
I think that's throwing in the towel. I think, no, what we have to do is we have to make sure, we have to be shameless in how we put all the ingredients together of our stories, and we have to think, right, what's the thing that's really, or what's the combination of flavours that's just going to be absolutely, it's going to grasp people by the lapels. And I think we've sort of touched on them, really. Humour is very important. But I think adventure is really good, great characters, and I think everybody, let's not try and compete with, as we've said, these devices exist. Let's provide something that's so incredibly different, and children will know. Our children spend time on devices, but they've also learnt to love reading, and I think they don't necessarily blur. There's no they're quite different worlds, really.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, I think it's that really. It's making sure you're giving children something that's just it's got real oomph, and they're thinking, this is great. I want to hear the next chapter.
And once you get that, you're confident that they will commit to a longer book and a series.
I think
those
so,
immersive
and I think
worlds.
actually, obviously the Harry Potter series is now really very old, I suppose, really comparatively. But you can that was born out. Even then, people were talking about short attention spans, and these great bricks of Harry Potter that children would lug around and cheerfully read. And it was, I think we mustn't underestimate people's hunger, their appetite for really good stories, and I think people will whip through any story of any length if it's good enough.
Mikey, we hear a lot about the reading crisis, but could it be a great opportunity for illustrators? Because traditionally, particularly in this country, sometimes illustration is unfairly regarded as secondary to the words, and there seems to be a much stronger interest now from publishers that they need more visually, interesting books. If you want to get a kid off Minecraft and into a book, you're kind of using a lot of the techniques from video games. You're using, visual things to entice them. So it could be a great thing for illustrators.
Yeah, absolutely. I was saying earlier, my son got into one of our favourite book series because I was reading it. It was this book series called Lightfall. It's a graphic novel, and it's gorgeously illustrated by Tim Probert. And my son just sort of looked over my shoulder and was like, "What's that?" And it was just because it looked so beautiful. It absolutely drew him in. And then I was like, "Fine, I'll go back to the beginning." And we're sort of 3 books in now. And it's, because of that sugary coating of illustration, that sort of very quickly accessible portal. But the thing that hooked him was the mystery, and going back to what you're saying about cliffhangers. And I think that's the thing that page-turning devices called books have over screens, which is that every page is like a mystery, and when they're fundamentally woven into the fabric of the story, like in Harry Potter and other books too, that mystery is such an incredible way to sort of draw people in, and we talk about it in a way. So we have a conversation, me and my son, ongoing, discussing the unsolved mysteries of this world, and we have the same thing about Harry Potter, and which we just nowhere near those sorts of levels of depth when it comes to talking about films, because it's all given to you, because it's just immediately given to you, you digest it, and you're like, well, that was the face value of that. But there's something about literature, and it applies to great picture books and graphic novels as well, that there's this hidden depth beneath it that you can discuss as a pair, and that's just such an incredible place to be able to work, to be able to sit between, not physically, a parent and child, and sort of offer them something that they can connect and bond over, that I don't think you get with film and sadly even animation, which is also brilliant.
I think that there's lots, just back on the illustration thing, there's lots of different ways to tell a story, and you don't actually have to necessarily read it in a linear way. If your child's really fascinated by the pictures, you can spend a long time with picture books talking about what can you see this, can you see that. It doesn't have to follow necessarily, because I think what we have to remember is when we're reading or spending time with children and books, what we're doing is a kind of psychological number on them, and we're showing them that this is really enjoyable and pleasurable, and this is something that we really love and want to spend time doing. So if it makes your child happy to sort of pore over the pictures and see how many tractors or how many sheep can you see in this picture, that's absolutely valid. It doesn't have to be in a linear way.
It's actually more than valid. I mean, the research suggests that actually the more you interact, the deeper the interactions, the more creativity in terms of the storytelling and the interactions, the stronger the developmental opportunities for your child are.
And the more pleasure they get out of it, the better, because then it's just, it becomes much more easy to then, let's say, let's do another one, or to, so get it into their minds that this is fun.
Jonathan, do you think we're going to see different types of books being published to respond to the reading crisis?
Yeah, I do, and I think we're also seeing the book industry beginning to think in different ways around new readers. I think that, sorry for being a bit gloomy again, but the challenges are so significant that they are about the sustainability of the industry, and I think that creativity will be one of the responses to that. And you look at the kind of, you can, as you began to say, you can begin to profile the kind of children and young people who aren't connecting with books that are published at the moment. And that is about their characteristics and their social backgrounds. That might be about their ethnicity, that might be about all sorts of things. It might even be about where they live as well. So I think that creativity in terms of the representation of different communities, all those kind of things, which has been such a strong driver in the industry, has to kind of be ramped up.
So there has been a shift, maybe in recent years. There's been a lot of books published with very worthy and noble messages, with like positive messages. And sometimes I feel when I see all the hundreds and hundreds of books that get sent to us in the Times book cupboard, sometimes I feel like, where's the escapism? Where's the fun? Yes, of course, all the representation is crucial, but beyond that, a bit of magic, a bit of imagination. Don't have sort of a lot of the social problems always reflected back at kids. Maybe is there an opportunity for more of
what is
escapism?
wonderful there? I actually can't tell you about the book. Actually, I put a professional veil. I was sharing some books with the kids in year one in a school near where I live in Catford the other day, and their take on very worthy books were very subversive.
Really?
Because childhood is primarily about subversion, isn't it?
Okay.
It's getting one over on adults. It's different readings of adult situations. So I think children will always even if we think we're telling a story to children, which may be improving, they will frequently find their own narrative, which is cheeky.
What have you found recently? What have been sort of big hits that have stood out? You've noticed people like younger readers really responding to.
Do you know actually when we were talking earlier, the thing which has absolutely hit me recently is the way in which children are excited about taking the story away from the page. So you will start with a story, and they will seize that narrative. And I think that desire to be interactive around stories, it's probably got something to do with technology and their desire to be but their desire to run with a story and take it in their own directions. I mean, never mind publishing changes. I think there's a change in appetite for children to take hold of stories. And they're more excited about being interactive in terms of their reading experience, which is great, absolutely fantastic. I mean, we used to play games in the playground based on books, Far Away Tree and that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's taking it one further.
I think children and parents, they just love to laugh together as well. Yeah. I mean, laughing is so bonding. It's just a wonderful thing to laugh. Funny books are always top of the list when you look at the data about the most popular books. Funny books are, and that actually takes me on to thinking about when you're reading aloud, to really ham it up. They just love it if you muck about as a parent and do stupid voices. If you're really good at doing a Welsh accent or being an American or a Brummie or something, then why not do that? Because it's just making it fun again, coming back to that fun.
We've just been
Brummie accents. I'm a Brummie. Sorry,
I was going to say we've just been reading the brilliant Jack Meggett Phillips's Beast of the Bethany series.
Oh, wonderful.
And we were halfway through book 2, and I had a voice for the beast. The beast. He was very calm. And he would always delay the last little consonant. Wow. Just something. Anyway, and Henry, our youngest, actually said, "Daddy, could we maybe change the voice?" I had nightmares last night. And I said, "Okay, of course." Anyway, I've put a pin in it because I like the voice. I'm going to keep it for something later on.
But this is why audiobooks are so important, because sadly, not everyone's father is Alexander. You know what I mean? But they can be. Well, not literally, but they can be. With audio, I'll never forget the first time I heard David Ullman's, do you know The Fire Eaters? His book set in the... one of his lesser known, Skellig, you know, incredibly famous. Fire Eaters, less so. But I heard his audio version of it, and it was kind of years ago when it was probably still books on tape, actually. And he told it, obviously, with his amazing Geordie accent. And the poetry in the book suddenly came to the fore. And there is definitely something about, you know, if your repertoire of voices begins and ends at Wolverhampton, then yes, dip into the wonderful world of Alexander Armstrong.
I feel I have to defend introvert parents here. It's like you've just done a massive, long day of work. You've got a million things to do, and then suddenly at dinner time,
Except put on a West End musical.
You've got to put on some Edinburgh Fringe show.
Absolutely,
When
exactly.
it's the last thing you feel like doing, it's like,
Oh.
it's another thing I've
Oh,
failed
but it doesn't
at.
have to be complicated.
Or
You
am I
can do a
being too
squeaky
negative?
voice or a gruff voice or anything, really. Or even get the children to do the voices. You know.
It's a good idea.
Yeah,
I
chuck
need to
around
put in
the
more
characters.
effort. No, one thing I have found difficult, and I don't know if anyone else has had this problem. So my son is 11, and he really is responding to, he's reading to manga and all the there's so many more interesting illustrated novels now, there's so many beautiful graphic novels, but trying to find the right one for the right age group is really difficult, and I've got it wrong a couple of times and sort of sent him upstairs, and he comes down an hour or two later, sort of a horrified look in his eyes, saying, Mum, that was not for me. You know, and it's actually been really, he's far too old for him and a bit too spooky or violent. It's actually quite difficult with manga and things like that, getting the right age range. Any tips for parents in that regard?
You know, my solution would go to a library. But I mean, I think you're particularly right in terms of graphic novels. Pitching them is incredibly challenging. Yeah, as a generous uncle, Tales on Moon Lane are my, you know, with my. So, I mean, you need the support of those experts in the community, don't you? The bookseller, the librarian, who do read and do know those books inside out. Because, as you say, pitching, particularly graphics, is so very challenging.
But I think also it's quite interesting going the other way, because you know, if you allow a child to choose what they read, but also what they have read to them, it's quite surprising sometimes that they choose things that they used to love, because it depends what mood they're in, but it can be very comforting and sort of. So I think as a parent, it's important not to kind of prejudge and sort of say, oh, that's too old or that's too young, or but again. Other side of it, it's very motivating sometimes to read things that are a bit older and a bit grown up. And that can be a good way to kind of read aloud to an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, is something a bit older than their own reading ability. So they feel very excited and grown up, as I say.
So psychologically, it's very important in terms of young people's development, particularly at transitional moments when they're moving into teenage years and moments like that, that they can go back to those books that they enjoyed earlier and remember and recall their childhood a bit. I mean, we all do it. I mean, like, most of us have got a book. For me, it's Alison at This Traveller in Time, that we read when we were 7 or 8, and we go back to, and psychologically it's important. It's particularly important for teenagers to actually reread books which they read when they were children. And a lot of teenagers also will hang on to serious fiction which was intended for younger readers into teenage years for that psychological reason as well. And it's nothing to be worried about. It's an important activity.
Yeah.
It really is.
We recently did a piece of research with 13-year-olds, and it's a social book club. But it was really interesting that they were telling the librarians that they remembered being read to, the Gruffalo and things when they were young, and how much they loved it. And I remember one little boy, he said, it gave me a really nice warm feeling. And you think, oh, well, it's a shame that they're not having that now.
So perhaps to wrap up, maybe we can go to each of the panellists just to share one tip, if your go-to tip for trying to boost reading over the summer holidays, and then we can open it up to you guys. And if you've got any questions for the panellists, do share your experiences as well. But Alison, if you take away one thing.
I would say treat it as a kind of project, a 6-week project, make a reading promise and see where it takes you. And I can guarantee, because every parent I've ever worked with who's done this has had transformational effect on their child's motivation to read. So yeah, make a promise to read as close to every day as you can through the summer and see what happens, and then tell us about it in September. Jonathan?
Three locations for tips on the internet. The first, to disprove Alexander's point that YouTube is full of porn and doom. Alison is on YouTube, brilliantly on YouTube. Wonderful tips from Alison as part of Book Squad, HarperCollins' own resource for parenting over the summer. Secondly, the Summer Reading Challenge, summerreadingchallenge.org.uk. Log in and kids can take part online in terms of the Summer Reading Challenge. Thirdly, wordsforlife.org.uk, tips for parents during the summer.
Mikey?
I think cultivating a love of storytelling themselves is a wonderful way to empower children into wanting to read more books. So one thing we do quite a lot is just have little A5 folded bits of A4 paper, folded little blank pieces of paper lying around the house stapled, so they've got their own comic books that they can just fill in at any point. And we also play this game called Fortunately, Unfortunately, and we do it around dinner or wherever's convenient because people don't have time, where some person says, fortunately the sun was shining, but unfortunately the clouds are on the horizon. And before you know it, everyone's been involved in writing the story of their own.
Brilliant.
And I feel like, empowering storytelling within children is a great way.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I was going to suggest that. Actually, pencil and paper games we do lots of, which is great. And just that great old ex libris game where everyone has to write the first line of a book and you have to guess which one's the real one. It's amazing how clever and perceptive children are and how good they are at sort of really not bad pastiche. And once they've picked up on that and they spot that everyone loves it, it's amazing how that storytelling thing sort of gets going. I think, I'm trying to think, yes, I mean, you're completely right. YouTube's full of, it has so many wonderful things as well. It's the sort of homemade YouTube things that people watch Anyway, we had the Puffin Club when I was little, which was, I think, was just the most exciting thing. And there was something particularly exciting about a shiny magazine, actual physical thing coming through that was yours, was addressed to you. And aged 8 or whatever it was, 9, you could open up your own little thing and read. And anything like that just sort of, displays books in front of children and lets them just, I don't know, there's something very exciting physically about a book. So yes, going to the free bookshop or the reading challenge. I think anything like that just makes it an exciting journey, an adventure. Yeah.
Great. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, anyone want to share experiences?
So my son is. Hi, thank you so much for all the great trips. I just had the biggest smile on my face listening to you. It just brought back memories from my own childhood. My son is 2.5 years old, and I was never read to for pleasure when I was growing up, and I had to actually hide my books inside my school books to read because my parents were like very academic, and for me it's very important that he reads for pleasure, and we've so far got it we've got it on point. My only question is how to sustain it when he goes into, because we are already seeing the peer pressure, not really, but sort of like children discussing and talking things among themselves and feeling a pressure to almost get on to the next trendy thing, which may be the screens or a show or something, as against books. So we are always discussing how to sustain this habit when he goes into school. Do you have any tips for that?
Buy copies of the book you're reading for their friends. We did it with Lightfall. Sorry to mention Lightfall like the 5th time, but we bought this graphic novel for all of Axel's friends. And then now they're all discussing it, as in they're all part of this little cult who love this graphic novel. And I was like, yes, it's sort of found that insidious way into his social life.
Well, I think it's really quite simple. You just keep on reading aloud to him all the way through primary school, all the way. And a lot of people think maybe that's, once a child can read, it's babying them, or it's not right to continue reading, but it's not so at all. So if you look at the data, there's a very clear correlation between the frequency that children are read to, right up to the age of 13, and the frequency that they choose to read themselves. So it's not instead of, it's as well as, and what you're doing is kind of creating the habit and the routine so that it really does stick. So I would say, if you carry on reading aloud to him, it won't fade away.
And also, all the studies reveal that the outcomes in terms of imagination, in terms of application, focus, wellness, just general well-being, I mean, all of these positives grow from that. So you've started something really wonderful. And he can also keep up to speed with all the other stuff that people are chatting about in the playground. But, you know, keeping that book habit going is just going to be wonderful.
And what Mikey said was at the very heart of it, that, you know, when young people grow up over particularly those early teen years, their worlds change. The pressures, the impetus, their interests change. And unless their reading experience moves into the new social contexts, the new interest areas, all those kind of things, then it would be stuck in it as a thing of childhood. So, you know, he's clever. Yeah, it's that ability to work with the weave of their new experiences that's important.
Yeah.
One more question at the back there.
Thank you for today. It's been really interesting. Sorry, I'm jumping in and out of the microphone. Where my son's really into Percy Jackson at the moment, and he's kind of in book 4, and he's kind of racing through them and can't wait for the next one. But what I struggle with is where to find the next book from, and I know you say libraries, but are there any good websites or anything like that that we could go to as well to find things?
There's the Times Children's Book of the Week.
That took
Every
longer than I thought.
Saturday. All the best books reviewed there.
I mean, bookshops I've been doing quite a lot of window paintings over the last year, and one of the lovely things, I frequently forget my earphones, so I just have to sort of sit in silence for like 8 or 9 hours. And listening to the booksellers talk to young people coming in has like reduced me to tears in a couple of instances of these kids who come in, and obviously it means so much to them to like talk to the booksellers, and they're so knowledgeable about, you know, because they're huge fans themselves, often of like children's literature and whatever, they're, you know, incredibly well placed to do that. So I'd say, you know, just talking, when next time you go into a bookshop, just approach somebody and ask for advice, and it's amazing what you get out of people.
And Love Reading for Kids is a great website as well. There's a lot on there. Yeah, librarians.
There's Book Trust's 100 books. There's on the internet. There's all sorts of wonderful things. But I mean, I do think the point you made at the very beginning, very subtly, the fact that the reviewing of children's books is a really important activity, and the conversation about children's literature is really culturally and socially enriching. You don't just look for quick tips. Do, if you can, immerse yourself in the reviews and the thinking about it, because it's a fascinating area. It reflects the demography of childhood itself, and in some ways it leads that. It's a very, very interesting thing. So yeah, get the quick tips if you want, but also do think about spending a bit of time reading the reviews, because frequently they take you to a very interesting place.
Wise words. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi all. So obviously, great talk about parents being able to read to their children, but as people who maybe don't have children or young relatives but want to be involved in getting reading out there and getting more kids reading, what would you recommend?
Loads of volunteering opportunities on this. I mean, in your community, make contact with your local schools, your local library. People are always on the lookout. If you want to take it further, volunteer and become your local primary school governor for literacy. They will love you if you're passionate about it. There is a massive need for volunteers out there. Pretty much every charity you can possibly imagine, including the National Literacy Trust, has thousands of volunteers in communities working in different ways. Those opportunities are endless as well. Absolutely, there is it's like the NHS. There is a bottomless demand for reading volunteers in this nation, and remember that we're talking about reading with your children. You talk about the fact that not everyone has children in their family. Also, I was in Middlesbrough the week before last, 40% of the population in North Ormsby is functionally illiterate, and those parents after the time their children are 6 will have reading ages below their children. The need for reading skills to support the development of children in this country is not just from teachers and librarians, it is from the general population. And if you're feeling generous enough to volunteer in that space, it's an amazing thing to do.
I think there was a question from this gentleman over here.
Hello. Oh, hello. Just first, a thanks for Mikey for plugging our book. I work for the division that looks after Lightful.
Oh, not really?
Any Harper parents, members who want to plug a copy, give me a note.
Okay.
So thank you. My son's a big fan of it as well. One quick mention, just an idea, because I think there's been a lot of talk about fiction and stories, but actually non-fiction for kids. My son's obsessed with animals and all sorts. There's lots of non-fiction out there, but if your child has a passion, it's a great way to get them into books. But my question is about when you've got children with different ages in a family, and any kind of ideas of trying to bring them both in when you've got sort of a few years between children and getting them to be together and celebrate books, the same books, ideally, together.
Let's take that one. Mikey?
It is difficult. Yeah, I've got a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, and so that is a nightly challenge for me. And I think we just take turns. I don't know if there's a really sort of eloquent answer to it. Do my daughters first, but we try to make sure that they're I guess they're just good picture books that also have something that the 8-year-old will enjoy as well. And likewise with the 8-year-old, I just get interrupted basically by the 4-year-old when I'm reading my 8-year-olds. I'm just what's happening? They're in a sweet shop. So, okay, that is a tip. Don't try and explain the big book to the younger child. Just give them a very base fact that they'll be happy with. That seems to have worked for me in terms of keeping both plates spinning while trying to entertain both. But yeah, it's a conundrum.
Or even
Books with
just
pictures.
getting the older child to read to the younger child. My 11-year-old loves to read to the 2 5-year-olds, and it makes him feel special. And so those little moments when that does happen, you can feel very smug about it. It doesn't happen very often, but he loves the authority of doing that. It can be quite an easy way of doing it.
Yeah. I know some books can stretch. So I'm just thinking a very personal example, but I can remember so clearly when I was 9 and my brothers were 6 and 3, my mother reading Winnie the Pooh. And it actually kind of worked for all of us.
Yeah.
So that was one,
Yeah.
sometimes something can work across all ages, sometimes.
Any other questions? One point I wanted to say, 'cause we did touch on this, Alison, that at a certain point when they get into secondary school, there's a sense that you don't read aloud to the kids anymore. And I've just found, I don't know if anyone else has found this, but in my experience, my son has really responded to reading out loud at that point, much more so than when he was younger.
Yeah.
And it's actually not really become about the book. It's especially if it's a school-based book, like a contemporary book, and something that maybe, there's one particular book we're reading at the moment, Nate Lesore's What Happens Online, and it's a book that sort of speaks in the language that he understands, the way his friends speak, and he's taking great pride in explaining to me all the slang, and it's a little moment to chat about what's happening in their school day, and it's almost more valuable at that age than younger, I've found.
Yeah.
I don't know what you
I
guys
think
have
the
found.
emotional connection that comes from reading and sharing stories is so powerful. It's unlike anything else, really. So yes, and you're never too old to be read to. I would love it if I was read to still.
Oh my God, wouldn't it be wonderful?
Do you not read to? Did you not read to each other at home?
When I met my husband, he actually did read to me. I think that's how he hooked me in.
Me and my partner read. Very good seduction tip. Okay,
Yeah.
different conversation. But I mean, going back to the core question. One of the things which our research service looks at is what children and young people get out of the reading experience. One of the themes that has grown at the same time as concerns about children's mental health have grown is a sense that actually children and young people get well-being from reading. And I think what you just described there in terms of the challenges of teenage years, all those, that safe space is so important. And the danger is that we look back to our own childhoods and try and reconstruct that as the reading environment for our children. Their lives are different.
Completely, yeah.
And they're different in negative ways, potentially, as we've been discussing in terms of, but actually the desire, the need to read potentially has changed. And perhaps it's not just because, I grew up in the 70s in Birmingham, it was just so boring. It might not just be that the need to change, reading to change because it's less, it may be that the need to change now, read has become about well-being, has become about those negative effects, and the fact that reading as an activity, particularly a shared activity, gives you a framework for exploring emotions in a safe space, particularly in a parental context of love, which even into your teenage years will be really, really important.
You were saying, Lucy, earlier that it's an opportunity where, when you're reading to your 11-year-old, that's when the conversations open up about other aspects.
Yeah, that's when you find out what, he's had a fallout at school, and sort of it becomes just a moment where in the day when you can have a chat to each other, because it can be difficult. Again, everybody's so busy, everyone's rushing about constantly. If you just slow down for those moments, it can be good. But it's
completely
difficult to make it
different
happen.
response if when they come home from school and you sort of say, oh, how was school today, or what did you do? Nothing. It's completely different when the conversation happens around a book and story time. Yeah.
I mean, just that last point, Alexander. You've got 4 sons, is that right?
Yeah.
And how did you find their sort of the need for reading changed as they become teenagers, as they become older?
Yes, it was interesting. I mean, they sort of peeled off from, I guess when they reached about sort of 13, they would kind of take themselves off with their own book and not sit in their pajamas for the general daddy story time. But it was, so I guess that they would find their own things. And it's very interesting, actually, and I remember the same. They were very keen to read older books, rather older than perhaps their recommended age group. I remember this, and that's actually another reason why summer is such a great time for, because if you're ever in a holiday cottage, you find such wonderful bookshelves of old Enid Blyton, old Desmond Bagley books, and it's fabulous old adventure stories and things. And that's another fun thing you can do on summer holidays, actually. But I think they would just peel off and just try things, and we would always pass on books that we'd enjoyed.
I think that's really powerful to pass on something that you've enjoyed, because it really does feel very grown up. Dad thinks that I'm old enough for this.
Absolutely.
It's quite a big deal.
And you have really good chats as well. I mean, because they want to know what you thought as they get to the end of each chapter.
It's very nice.
Well, on that note, I realise that time is running out, so I just wanted to say thank you to our panellists. So if you'd all like to join me in thanking them. I did mention the giveaway at the beginning, so please do feel free, have a look at the wonderful books out there. And also, I've just discovered myself that all News UK employees get a 70% discount on HarperCollins books. So if you do, there should be a QR code, I think. If you use that, then you can get a good discount. So thank you all so much for coming today. Cheers, bye-bye.